Welcome into Game Night Live Rewind, our lacrosse video presented by Haslem and Associates and brought to you by the Riley Jensen Mental Performance Group. Dane Stewart, please be joined by Tim Haslem. Tim, man, so great to have lacrosse back here in the state. And first time we've got classification. We've had kind of an alignment classification this year rather than the divisions. And so we'll go through 6A, 5A, 4A, some top teams and performances, things that we've seen. But Tim, let's get right into this. Our Haslem Associates opening statement. When you look at the first couple of weeks of lacrosse here in the state of Utah, what have you felt like has really kind of stood out here to start our 2022 campaign?
There's certainly been some surprises, from a couple teams, and not necessarily even just the way that teams are playing well, but some that have traditionally played well, but that aren't. The other things that stand out would be Corner Canyon, obviously the favorite. They're on a rampage and will probably continue on a rampage. The other team that we thought was great is great this year, and that's Olympus, right? They're certainly the 5A favorite, and they've come out and played extremely well. The other sort of thing that I've noticed going to a bunch of games is, and I talked about this, off air, but every coach feels that their team is young. And it's just an interesting observation. There are some teams out there with a bunch of seniors this year, but really still, Dane, we may be dealing with some of the effects of COVID and a missed season. These juniors and seniors were freshmen and sophomores when their seasons got canceled, and how does that turn out 2 years later because they missed the whole season, the whole practice. So a couple interesting storylines there, but those are kind of the things that stay down to me.
Well, you talked about Corner Canyon. Look, they've been on an absolute tear to start the year, still undefeated. We were talking about this week, Tim. Look, they had the chance to really go out and plant the flag for the state of Utah. They head out to Colorado, take on Cherry Creek, and Corner Canyon coming up with maybe one of the biggest wins in state history in the sport of lacrosse.
It certainly was the biggest win for Utah. Absolutely. Like you said, they went and played Cherry Creek, who's a traditional powerhouse in Colorado. Cherry Creek drove 2 hours west. Corner Canyon drove 6 hours east to play that game at a neutral site right outside of Aspen. Corner Canyon's bus breaks down the night before. The coach has to scramble and get 12 passenger vans, organize the team into vans. They drive 6 hours out there. They leave at 4 in the morning, something like that. Go play. I believe they played a JV game too. So they played JV varsity and then came back home, And in the meantime, Dane, there was a game in the middle, and it happened to be a fantastic game. Corner Canyon trailed 9-6 at the end of the third quarter. Now, Corner Canyon hasn't trailed a game in a long time. And so how do you respond? How do you rely on your players? What do you tell your players if they've never been through that as a team in the last couple of years? And they went out and they shut out Cherry Creek. Cherry Creek didn't score in the last quarter. And that mainly because of great play by the Corner Canyon defense and goalie Aiden Sandy. But then the offense, was able to reel off 4 goals and win the game. It was just an incredible win.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about obviously a big win, come from behind win, but how about you shut out Cherry Creek? I think Aiden Sandy wasn't he your player of the week this last week, Tim?
He was the Deseret News player of the week.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is
right.
way
I knew
more
I'd
important.
seen that somewhere. I knew I had seen that somewhere. But heck of a job. And look, Mason Quick, 3 goals, 4 assists in that one to lead the way for the Chargers. John King had a great offensive game as well. And look, we talk about teams playing out of state. Well, we're going to get a chance to just see how good this team really is. Tim, we were talking about it. They're going to go out of state again this upcoming week, a chance to take on a couple teams from the state of California.
That's right. They're heading to Southern California, going to take on, a powerhouse in Mater Dei. And, Mater Dei is a school that has just a long history of great athletics. Their lacrosse team hasn't been super duper, but they're certainly coming on. You think of like Matt Barkley played there, the old USC, been Bills quarterback, just their alumni is insane. And so for them to go play them in lacrosse is awesome. And then they're playing Corona Del Mar, who USA Lacrosse magazine has ranked as #1 right now in the West. And so an awesome opportunity, Dane, 2 Corner Canyon victories there really cements this team even further into the record books and continues to raise the elevation of the profile of Utah lacrosse.
It's awesome. And I think most in the state of Utah this week. Going to be wearing our Charger hats. Go Chargers! And best of luck to Corner Canyon as they head out of state to take on a couple of regional national powers. So, Tim, obviously Corner Canyon, look, they've been the favorite in 6A, but when we look at the 6A classification, Davis been off to a good start. Fremont, a team that hasn't scored less than, I think, 15 goals in a game so far this year. Their offense has been great. They're 4-1 through the first couple of weeks of the year. You look at AF, Lone Peak, I think has been stronger than we thought. Talk about some of the other top teams here in 6A.
You hit it right on the head. We have American Fork, who I think everyone thought would be the second best team. They've had some interesting offensive outputs lately. We'll put it that way. But just a great team. And then Lone Peak, like you said, they lost Garrett Haas last year and Luke Tucker, two phenomenal players. But they've come on really strong, had some great wins, played some teams really tight. The consensus there is that they're just athletic and well coached, and so it's exciting to see kind of what happens there. Those two are obviously in the same region. You look at Region 3, and you've got Mountain Ridge, who's the clear favorite in that region. Just an excellent team as well. They've had some fantastic results. Then you talk about sort of that Region 1, like you mentioned, Davis and Fremont. Those are the two front runners for sure in that region. Davis is, I believe, 5-1. Their lone loss is Corner Canyon, 20-3. It was their first game of the year. Everyone's getting beat up by Corner Canyon. But then, they go and beat Fremont by 1 in just a great test. That the top of that region is very competitive. It wouldn't surprise me if like Weber can get in there and steal a win here or there. So just really exciting. Yeah. And so those are kind of the 6A. That's kind of how I see the 6A bracket at the moment.
That Davis Fremont game was a good one. 16-15. Davis got the win. Rhett Rice had 4 goals. Emmett Rice had 4 goals in that one to lead the way for the Darts. And this Fremont team, I was surprised. I was looking at scores. I'm like, man, they score a lot of goals. You're going to have to bring your defense when you play the Silver Wolves. As we wrap up 6A, Tim, kind of move on to 5A. You mentioned Olympus, probably the cream of the crop in 5A this year. Park City hoping to have something to say to that, but Olympus has looked really strong out of the chute. Big win over Alta. Also have a big win against Green Canyon.
They have, and they're a team that's been playing well for a lot of years. Their studs play together on a club or travel team, so very familiar with each other. This is kind of what these kids have been gearing up for. Is their senior year. This is kind of what they've had marked on their calendars all this time, going to all these club tournaments, stuff like that. And they're just a phenomenal team. You talk about beating Alta. Olympus was up 8-0 after the first quarter.
Wow.
That's a lot. That's a lot of goals in one quarter for any team, let alone against Alta. And then you look at a team like Alta, and they're 5-2 right now. Their lone losses though are to Olympus, and then a Cherokee Trail team from Colorado who is very good. So you look at them and say, well, where do they fit in? And then there's a slew of teams after that we can talk about, where they may fit in as well.
Yeah. Well, and a couple teams that, as I was going through some things, we haven't even talked Park City. Let's take a moment real quick, talk Park City. Tim, this feels like a team that early on, I know there were some people that were wondering, how good is Park City going to be? They graduated some talent, had some players transfer out. It feels like they are building a lot of momentum here in the early part of the year.
Yeah, totally. You can't talk lacrosse in Utah without mentioning Park City in one way or another. You're absolutely right. So they're sitting at 3-2. Their losses have come to Corner Canyon, go figure, and American Fork in overtime, and so both 6A opponents, so they're still undefeated in the 5A play. They still have Mountain Ridge, Alta, and Olympus on their schedule, so some room there to certainly prove themselves. And then you talk about Corner Canyon going to Southern California. Park City is going to Colorado this weekend to take on Valor Christian, who's a fantastic team, and that same Cherry Creek team that Corner Canyon beat. So an opportunity for them to prove themselves. They are probably going to be the most battle-tested team when it comes to the playoffs. They've scheduled every hard team. They're going out of state, playing great competition. Like they've done it right. And Coach Persky, obviously a great coach with his staff, and it'll be interesting to see where they end up.
Yeah, certainly will be. And look, I mean, you talk about battle tested. They lost by 1 to AF. That Corner Canyon game, they made a late surge to try to make that more respectable. But this is a team that it does feel like we saw them. Buyer and company, there's a couple buyers on that team, but they are getting stronger and stronger. And when they play the top of their game, they can go up against a lot of really good, talented teams. can't wait to see how well they do against that Cherry Creek team, Valor Christian, this weekend. That'll be a couple good matches coming our way. Let's pivot a little bit because Region 5, Box Elder, this is a team, they've got a couple good wins. Woods Cross with a couple nice wins as well. We talk about some of the favorites in Olympus and Alta being really strong, Park City. Tim, who are some of the other teams in 5A to keep an eye on here?
Yeah, you talk about Region 5, it's going to be Bountiful. They're a great squad. They beat Brighton 8-6 this week. They've got a couple studs. One is their pole, Cole Terry, who's just a phenomenal athlete. He's all over the field. He's a ground ball monster. If you were going to a scrum and needed a ground ball, I'd pick Colts first. Almost any over almost any other player in the state, really, to be honest with you. And then they've got a couple nice offensive pieces. You look at like Hayden Hansen, is capable of putting up big goals.
Yeah.
And so I would lean towards Bountiful in that region. But you talk about like a team like Timpview, right, who's 6-1. Their lone loss coming to Alta. You talk about like a Brighton, who's traditionally been a powerhouse. I've had some tricky results lately. But like where does like East or who we saw last night, a Skyline, where do they fit into this mix? Can they get hot when the time is right and make a push in the playoffs? It's those are kind of the teams that I'm looking at. It obviously there's a bunch more, but just super excited to see where this all shakes out.
Well, you talk about a couple teams. I mean, how about that East team? They played in Lone Peak. We talked about Lone Peak a little bit earlier, but that was a tie game going into the fourth. Lone Peak outscores them 4-0 in the fourth to win 11-7. That East team, they've been in some battles, and new coaching staff there trying to get things worked out there. That's a scary team, and even Skyline. I love that you brought that up. We were there this last week as they took on Skyline or as they took on Wasatch. And Britton Brown, man, that guy's got a rocket for a shot. Had great support. McNally and others stepping up to help Skyline in a kind of back and forth battle against Wasatch in an instant classic. And so I love some of those other teams. I did mention Box Elder earlier. How about this stat line? Quade Simpson, he had 8 goals for Box Elder in their 15-6 win over Orem. Not a lot of players go for 8 goals. So I wanted to point that out. Quade had a big night for the Bees.
Absolutely. And when we talk about a Box Elder Orem matchup, I immediately go to, is that the longest road trip of the year, right? One of those teams was on the bus for a long time.
Yeah. Yep. Tim, let's move to 4A. This is interesting, right? Because you've got kind of your traditional 4A Cache Valley region, Green Canyon. We've talked about them. They had an 8-3 win over Brighton this last week, and they've been playing some 5A, 6A teams. This is a team that made a run in the postseason last year in that A division. This is a good Green Canyon team. I think most people probably figure they're the favorite. But then you look at Skyview's been off to a nice start. Ridgeline's been off to a nice start. And then you have the other 4A region that's really comprised of the Waterfords and the Juan Diegos and some of those smaller classification teams that are playing in that 4A classification for lacrosse. How do you see the 4A classification shaking out?
Like you said, it's certainly Green Canyon's to lose. If you look at the standings and everything on paper, they're 2-4, and so you may go, man, what are you talking about, right? But I look at their schedule; they probably don't have another loss on their schedule. You mentioned they've been playing tough teams. They've lost to Lone Peak in time. They lost to Mountain Ridge by 1 in a tournament game, and then they lost to Olympus and Park City. Well, guess what, Dane? A lot of teams are going to lose to Olympus and Park City this year. A lot of teams are going to lose to Mountain Ridge and Lone Peak this year. And so, definitely they are, certainly also going to be battle tested, and it's definitely theirs to lose, right? You talk about those other teams, though, in Skyview and Ridgeline. Ridgeline off to a great start. Skyview off to a great start. Both of those teams well coached. The Ridgeline coach, Clay Christopherson, has been coaching lacrosse in Cache Valley for years, like 10 decades of time. Just been a great ambassador for the game up there. And then you mentioned Waterford, Juan Diego, and UMA, which are the other 3 schools in that other region. And it's down here for them. I'm going to be honest. And so it'll be interesting, though, to see how they can maybe turn that around, get some of their players maybe to play above what they're comfortable with or what they're used to, and see where they end up, as we continue on.
So, Tim, we've got some big games coming up. We talked about Corner Canyon going out of state. Talk about Park City. They're going out of state. How about Brighton? They're going out of state, going to take on Cathedral Catholic and La Jolla in the next couple of weeks. So we've got an opportunity for Utah to kind of raise the banner here regionally and really make some noise in terms of how good our lacrosse here is in the state. But we got some big matchups coming up across the state. And Tim, we didn't talk about this. I'm going to put you on the spot. Let's do some picks, shall we? You want to do some picks?
Of course, I love it.
All right, we're going to start. How about the battle of the Wasatch back at Park City at Wasatch? That game coming up next week. Tim, we've seen both these two teams early part of the year. Who do you got in this one?
Dane, as we talked to some of the Wasatch faithful last night, they were confident in their team. If there was a year to catch Park City, it would probably be this one. But Park City is just too dangerous, too many great players. Obviously well coached. I'm going to go Park City on this one.
I'll go Park City as well. I'll tell you, if Wasatch has something going for them, it's the fact that Game Night Live Rewind will not stream that game. They're 0-2 in one-goal games when we've been there. We're hoping we break that streak with Wasatch here soon, but we will not jinx them on Wednesday. But I'm going to go Park City as well. So Riverton at Bingham, a great rivalry in other sports in Region 3. Tim, who you got in this one?
This is a tough one for me, too. I've seen Bingham play this year, and I haven't seen Riverton. I actually haven't seen Riverton in a few years. I think this will be a closer game than maybe both teams will want. But I'm going to have to go with Bingham on this one. I feel like they just have a little bit more history, a little bit more talent, a little bit more team, guys playing club, stuff like that. That's going to push them over that edge. They're just going to want it more, and I think they'll come out victorious.
It is at Bingham. I figure you got to love the Miners at home, but I'm going to roll with Riverton. I think I've been off to a good start. Look, the football team, they've had Bingham's number the last couple of years. I know it's not football, but it's played on the same field. I'll roll Silver Wolves in this battle. Tim, we talked about some 4A teams. Waterford, Juan Diego, two proud programs in some growing years. Waterford at Juan Diego. Who do you think has this one, Tim?
I'm going to go with Waterford on this one. I think that the coaching staff there is going to have their boys ready to play. Juan Diego has had a tough go so far. They've got some very talented poles, and it's exciting to watch them kind of push transition and get up the field. But I think Waterford's going to get this one.
Yeah, I'll go with the Ravens as well in this one. I don't know if Juan Diego has enough offense, so I'll go with Watford in this matchup to get the win. Park City again at Mountain Ridge in what could be a doozy. Mountain Ridge up to filming at this point, still undefeated.
I'm going to pick Mountain Ridge right out of the gate. I think that they have a little bit more talent, a lot more weapons. Their face-off guy here, Colin Hurst, is the second best face-off guy in the state in terms of win percentage. And Dane, as well as anyone in lacrosse, face-offs are a big part of this. And so I think that'll give them the advantage, and I think going to be a Mountain Ridge win.
I think this is a prove-it game for Mountain Ridge, right? I mean, this is the opportunity for them to go up against a big-time power. They had that game with Olympus. That game was not played to completion, so this is the chance for them to really put their stamp on. But I'm not ready to ride off the Miners. I know you aren't either, but, man, I think this team is getting stronger. There's a lot of talent there. We saw them really downshift and just take it to Bountiful. I'll go with Park City in this one. I think it's a doozy. How about a battle of undefeateds up to this point in Region 4, AF at Skyridge?
I'm going to pick American Fork in this one. They have a bunch of talent. Their face-off guy is the number one face-off guy in the state, Zach Bazant, coming in at 88%. Skyridge has a nice team, great record, but some of those wins are against some of the lower teams down there in Utah County. So I think American Fork is going to be battle tested. The key for them is to play as a team. If they can do that, they could score lots of goals in this game. If they don't and they play maybe a little selfishly, then it could be. I still think they'll win, but it could be a much closer score than it should be.
For me, I think I've said, I think, Tim, we've talked about, I think AF is probably that second best team in 6A. When you beat Park City, that's a stamp of approval. I'll go with the Cavemen in this one as well. Top of region on the line here, early part of region, right? An early region game, Box Elder at Woods Cross.
I watched Woods Cross the other day. They were playing Highland. I ran down to their game and snapped some pictures for them. And I was impressed, Dane. Woods Cross hasn't had a strong program, maybe ever, or at least in a long time. And I was really impressed with their guys. Just a great group of kids. Um, they were well rounded across all facets, across all positions. So I'm going to put Woods Cross to win that one.
I'll go with Box Elder. This team, they've been scoring a lot of goals. I think this is a great game, by the way. I can't wait to see how this one plays out. I'll go with Box Elder on the road. Going to win. The B is going to buzz down to Woods Cross, come out with a win. Skyline at Timpview.
Oh, that's a good matchup. I think with Skyline, if they can play all four quarters, I felt like last night they kind of got sleepy in a few quarters. But if they can play all four, I think that they can come in and beat Timpview. But it's the same thing for Timpview, right? If they take a night off, Skyline will beat them. Timpview, though, 6-1. They've got some great players. You look at Charlie Friedman, who's one of the top point getters so far. And so, the question is, can Skyline stop him? There were flashes last night where they can. And there were flashes last night where they won't. And so I'm probably going to go Timpview in this one.
Yeah, I'll go Timpview in this one close. I was really impressed with Skyline last night. I thought Kerr played really well through some of the Wasatch pushes. He made some nice saves, especially early on after they had fallen down. But I'll go with Timpview in this. I just think T-Birds probably have just a little bit of an edge, but I think this is a great battle. Last one, we're going to head up north for some little high cheese. How about Ridgeline at Skyview, Tim?
Oh, that's a great contest. Well, probably going to be maybe the game that decides who takes second in the region. I've seen Skyview this year and liked them a lot. I haven't seen Ridgeline, but I've been impressed with their results. Where's the game being played, Dane?
At Skyview.
Okay, that's a great field. I'm going to pick Skyview then. They're going to impress the home crowd. They're going to get a 1-goal win over Ridgeline.
I'll tell you, Ridgeline, a couple momentous things for them. One, Ridgeline football beat Skyview football for the first time this year. Also, Ridgeline basketball won at Skyview for the first time. I'm going to roll with Ridgeline and the Riverhawks. Hey, man, it's the year of the Riverhawks this year against Skyview. So I'll go with Ridgeline in this one. Again, a fantastic battle up in 4A. So, Tim, any final thoughts, man? We kind of hope we've caught everyone up. We've got some great games coming up for you. Final thoughts before we wrap up this week's show, Tim?
Dane, it's still early in the season. Obviously, we're still in March. As people view this, maybe it'll be April by then. But just a great kickoff to the season. We're entering the spring break period where we have teams off and on, so there aren't as many games to look at or to watch. But then we just get into the thick of it, right? It just becomes region play. Teams are going after it, trying to win that region trophy to put in their trophy case to make their admins proud. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. Like we've talked about, a new playoff format this year. It's the 6A, 5A, 4A, where in past years it's just been relied on the RPI. It's funny, Dane, we complained a lot about the RPI, and now people are like, well, Corner Canyon's not going to play Olympus. What do you mean? Right?
Yeah.
So it's lacrosse fans seem to find a way to complain about a lot of stuff when they shouldn't. But it's just going to be exciting. I love the 5A, the 6A, 5A, 4A format because they're actually true state champions, right? In the old system,
Yeah.
I was a firm believer. You had your Class A was the state champion, and then you had two teams that essentially won mini tournaments. And so this way, I think it's a little more to hang on to. It's something to be proud of when you win these other tournaments, and so it's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be another great season, and can't wait.
Tell you, there's a lot of headlines. I feel like in each classification this year, but there's going to be a lot of great understories in some of these region battles. I mean, some of the picks we had here are games that we picked. These are early region battles of teams that have really impressive records. So, don't let the Corner Canyon or the Olympus kind of, steer you away from some of the great stuff that's going on in the other regions and in some of the other teams and matchups that we'll have. We're going to have it for you all. The rest of the year here, Tim and I will be out to at least one game a week. We'll also have lacrosse videos like this coming out every other week right here on KSLSports.com. And we'll have you all the way through the championships in 6A, 5A, and 4A. We cannot wait to bring you spring sports and lacrosse and continue to watch this great game. And it's a third year of classification, of sanctioning, and second year of actually playing in sanctioning. Cannot wait to be with you step by step throughout the rest of the year. Well, for Vince Francis, Tim Haslem, my name is Dane Stewart. Thank you for joining us so much, and we'll see you next time right here on Game Night Live Rewinds. Boys lacrosse video presented by Heidemann and Associates.